Cheer off, at least you've got the bad guy.
In 2019, a 32-year-old woman brutally murdered her parents and concealed their bodies in their home where she had been living rent-free. For 4 years, she successfully manipulated family members, neighbors, and the community to cover up the crime she had committed, until a suspecting GP began to question their absence from scheduled appointments and medication pickups. What drove her to commit such a horrific act? How did she manage to not get caught for 4 whole years? This is the gut-wrenching story of Virginia McCullough and the tragic chain of events that unfolded in the wake of her crime. Virginia McCullough is the youngest daughter of John and Lois McCullough, her victims. In 2019, Virginia moved in with her parents in Pump Hill, Great Baddow, seeking relief from the pressures of adulthood and the financial burdens that came with it. She told them she had hopes of becoming an artist and was studying to become one. Virginia also claimed that she had a job where she wasn't being paid. Both parents took her in joyfully. They were aged, in poor health, and in need of a caregiver. It was also their youngest daughter. It only made sense that they allowed her to live with them and felt safe around her. So she lived without any financial commitments. No paying for groceries, no bills, and no rent. Sadly, this wasn't enough for Virginia, as she was deep in debt and had a gambling addiction. She needed some sort of a financial breakthrough. She accumulated 3 months' worth of prescription drugs and bought a knife in May to crush the drugs. And on the 19th of June, she poisoned her dad, 70-year-old John McCullough, a retired business studies lecturer who had worked at Anglia Ruskin University. She crushed her prescription medication and mixed it in his drinks. The mixture was so strong that he lost his life a couple of hours later while lying in his bed. To hide the atrocity she had just committed, she hid his body in a homemade mausoleum, covering it with blankets and paintings. But she wasn't quite done with her plans yet. She sedated her mother, 71-year-old Lois, with a less strong drink and went to bed. The next morning, while her mother was listening to the radio, Virginia put on a pair of rubber gloves, picked up a hammer, and did the unthinkable. She struck Lois with the hammer and then proceeded to stab her 8 times until she slowly passed away. Once this was done, she stashed the body of her mother in sleeping bags and duvets and then hid it in a wardrobe. Now, both John and Lois were dead and somewhat buried in the place they called home. Virginia was able to get away with her crime for a while. It was 2019, the year the first case of COVID-19 was discovered, and the next year, 2020, the country was put on lockdown due to the pandemic. During this period, no one had heard or seen John and Lois, but nobody suspected a thing. There was a pandemic, and the couple were aged with existing medical conditions. It was only right that they stayed locked up in their home until the virus was put at bay. Plus, they were reclusive. People never really heard from them or saw them. Neighbors would sometimes hear Lois throwing a tantrum or screaming at someone, but they never truly knew who that was. When asked about her parents, Virginia would say they were sick and at home resting. And to zero the chances of her getting caught, she sent texts and gift cards to her siblings and other family members using her mother's phone and name. Just a moment, guys. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more mind-blowing true crime stories. You can also watch our previous videos if you love this one. Thank you. So, Virginia kept on with these lies up until the lockdown was eased and people could move and travel freely. She turned down invitations on the couple's behalf, told neighbors and friends that they traveled, and kept on sending gift cards and texts to friends and family. Virginia even made over 100 calls to her parents' GP surgeon, giving excuses on why they couldn't talk on the phone, visit the hospital for their routine checkup, or pick up their medications. She would sometimes call, pretending to be her mother, and cancel doctor appointments to keep people from becoming suspicious of the couple's frequent absence. Her plan was panning out pretty well until it wasn't. People who interacted with the deceased couple sensed that something wrong was going on. Virginia was acting weird. One of the first actual confrontations Virginia had concerning her parents was with Paul Hastings. He owned the Vines Fruiterers in the Vineyard shopping center close to the deceased's home. They always came around to buy groceries. This was very unusual. But Virginia told him that they no longer lived in Pump Hill and had relocated to Clacton because they were tired of people gossiping about them. Paul Hastings also mentioned that he would often see Virginia visit the store with a maternity dress and a fake baby bump, showing him what looked like a scan of the baby. He had his doubts about her stories, but he didn't really strike her to be a murderer, so no reports were made. Some neighbors reported that Virginia had claimed that she was attacked in her garden very early in the morning by 3 intruders, but that also didn't sound like a believable story. Pump Hill was a quiet neighborhood. You would barely have been confronted in that manner so early. Plus, the injuries looked self-inflicted too. The police interviewed her about this and got no lead since they didn't really happen to begin with. While some neighbors reported that she suddenly became super friendly, she would buy them food, flowers, and drinks. And it didn't matter how many times they turned her down, they were still going to meet these gifts at their doorstep. Another notable interaction was one with Alan Thompson, the owner of Thompson's TV shop in Great Baddow. John and Lois rented TVs from him for 20 years until they bought them outrightly 10 years ago. Virginia once asked Alan to come pick up one of her parents' ex-rentals, and when Alan's staff went to pick up the TV, she had already packaged it and dropped it at the front door. Rumor has it that she would sometimes call the police department to make complaints, hoping to divert any attention from the skeletons in her closet. Virginia would also sweep the front of the house a questionable number of times a day, almost like she didn't want to spend more time alone with the bodies. It was one of her many unusual habits that made the sudden disappearance of John and Lois more suspicious. She would also disappear to her flat in Chelmsford, which she would return to at weekends. Although there are suspicions she just hid herself away in the house. The stories weren't adding up, but the neighbors didn't file any formal complaints. They had little personal connection with the deceased, and most of their interactions were limited to brief greetings or occasional small talk in passing. Without a close relationship or regular contact, the neighbors had no reason to question Virginia's explanations, no matter how inconsistent they seemed. This lasted for 4 years, but things were about to change. On the 13th of September 2023, the couple's GP contacted the safeguarding team of Essex County Council. John and Lois had been cancelling his appointment for years, and John especially hadn't picked up his regular prescription, or so they thought. The council treated this as a missing persons case at first, so they contacted Essex police, who called Virginia on the 15th asking about her parents' whereabouts. She told them that they were out of town and wouldn't be back until October, but their absence sounded suspicious, especially since they hadn't come for any appointments with their GP in over 3 years. So they escalated it into a murder inquiry and got a search warrant. 2 days later, on the 15th of September, the police broke in through the back door and immediately saw Virginia.
Got it? Show me.
Knowing what had happened and expecting her judgment day to come, Virginia McCullough willingly let the police put handcuffs on her as they stated the reason for her arrest.
The time is 12/12, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder against Jonathan McCullough and Elias McCullough.
Yeah.
She told the officer,
I know that this would kind of come eventually. It's proper that I serve my punishment.
She also jumped into confessing what she did and how she did it.
They were basically, he didn't drink all of them. He only drank probably about half of 2. But yeah, when I went in the morning, this was before my mother. When I went in the morning, early hours, I got up about half an hour early, about 6 o'clock in the morning. Came in and he was gone. He was gone. It's
probably the easiest investigation the Essex police has had to deal with in a while. Virginia also told the officers where the bodies of John and Lois were and signed the statement one of the officers had made based on her confession.
right. So upstairs there were about 5 wardrobes.
Yep.
It's behind the bed, but back next to the sink. It's the second one. Cheer off, at least you fought the bad guy.
In an attempt to make the situation less serious than it is, she told the officers, "Cheer up, at least you caught the bad guy."
Cheer off, at least you fought the bad guy.
Unfortunately, this was neither the time nor the place for dark humour.
I'm not going to comment on anything. It's not my job to comment on it, okay, because I've got to be impartial with everything, okay, so I'm not going to give any comment.
She also admitted to maxing out her parents' credit card and taking huge loans using their names. Further investigation showed that the culprit had accrued about £150,000 and had lavished the whole amount, spending £21,000 of it on online gambling. While they were alive, Virginia had also stolen from them on multiple occasions, deceiving them into believing that they were being scammed. When brought in for questioning, Virginia talked about the murder weapon and gave more details on how she murdered both parents.
That's kitchen. It's in the middle, there's a brown carpet. Against the wall, opposite the shelves, so there are 2 long white shelves, they're opposite. where that is. That's where the Michael is.
She confessed to creating a cocktail of drugs and using it to murder her father. After her confession, she was taken to HMP Peterborough up until her trial. On the 4th of June 2024, Virginia admitted to 2 counts of murder. The prosecuting counsel applied for Virginia to serve a life sentence. They added that the gruesome murder of both parents was premeditated and brutally executed, and serving a life sentence was the only fair judgment. But the defense attorney, Christine Agnew, believed otherwise. She told the court that Virginia did not deserve to serve life since she admitted to her crimes willingly, adding that she didn't use her autism as an excuse. But the judge, just in justice, angered by her lack of remorse, sentenced her to life with a minimum of 36 years on the 11th of October 2024. He took into consideration the year she served on remand and stated that the reason why she won't be serving life is because she willingly admitted to the crime. She wouldn't be considered for parole until 2059. The other children of John and Lois McCullough have expressed their pain and sadness. They are heartbroken that their parents were brutally murdered by their sister. Lois's brother is utterly devastated that the last few letters he received from his sister were never really from her. A joint statement was issued by the victim's family. Our family has been left devastated and heartbroken at the deaths of our parents who were taken from us so cruelly. As we try to move forward with our lives, we will remember the happy times we enjoyed with them. Our mum and dad are forever in our hearts and are loved and missed beyond any measure. The whole family is in shambles and will forever be haunted by the death of both John and Lois McCullough. Now, while the neighbors had their suspicions almost immediately, some questions remain unanswered. How did Virginia manage to keep the bodies from emitting an odor for so long? And why did the victims' family members fail to visit for 4 years, even after noticing their prolonged absences and repeated cancellations of invitations? I guess no one truly suspected Virginia to be a murderer. May the souls of the deceased continue to rest in peace. Now you know about this, you're going to need to know about this next one.